Good morning, everyone. This is Michelle Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. I hope you're having a really great day, and I am already. I've already done my far infrared sauna. I'm about to go for a hike right after this podcast. But in the meantime, I'm really excited because I have a wonderful guest today. Her name is Maddy Dychtwald, and you may have heard of Maddy. Those of you who are in the health and longevity world that are watching today. Maddy has been prolific since her 40 years, actually, and I'm going to let her tell us her story. But welcome, Maddy. I'm glad to have you here today.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, we have so much in common, and it's just amazing when you meet somebody that you have that energy alignment with, and you really want to explore all the possibilities and share all your knowledge and experience. And well, 40 years will take us a while, right, Maddy?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the first question I have for you is, tell us about your journey. Everybody always wants to know, who are you? What led you to your current position? What were some of the biggest events along the way? So why don't you start as way back when in 40?
Okay.
And give us
Back in the day.
give us a quick synopsis of your journey in longevity.
Okay, for sure. So I've been on this beat of aging, longevity, even retirement, and reinventing what retirement really means for close to 40 years. My husband Ken and I actually started Age Wave, which is a think tank focused on aging, longevity, retirement. Back in the day. And you could do the math and figure out I started out in my 30s. I'm now in my 70s, so 74 years old, and I say it loud. And I think all of us, especially women, ought to be proud of our chronologic aging because it's, the alternative kind of sucks, right? So, yeah. And what we discovered way back then was 50 was considered over the hill.
Right.
Imagine that. I mean, things have really changed since then, which is the good news. So we were determined to go out to, frankly, corporate America, because they have so much influence and power, and try to reinvent the story of aging for them. Tell them that there's this new kind of aging that's going on that's more positive, more empowering, an opportunity for them to build brands that can appeal to a larger audience. Because at that time, we were seeing a demographic shift at the same time. We were seeing that younger population, which is usually where growth takes place, begin to shrink because people just were not having babies the way they used to. And we started to see, because of good health and wellness practices, we began to see that people were living longer, and that the fastest growing segment of the population was the oldest segment of the population. So we wanted to tell that story, and we went out and we did it.
How did you and Ken meet, and how did you know when you met him that this was going to be the soulmate that you would do, not only, as they say, for better or for worse, but not for lunch, but you did for better or for worse and for lunch?
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely.
It's a real test of a relationship when you can be together in both your personal life and your business life. So how did that happen?
Well, Ken and I actually both grew up part of the time, at least my family moved all the time when I was a kid. I mean, every 3 years we were living in a different location all over the country. But when I was in high school, I was living in New Jersey, and he was too. And he claims that he knew who I was. Who knew? Anyway, fast forward just to college, and we were both at a party in Miami over spring break. And that was back in the day. I mean, none of us were, we were doing everything that you can imagine. And he claims that he met me there. I have no recollection of that at all. But then fast forward to the 1980s, and I was living in LA. He was living up in the Bay Area, and we had some friends in common. And I get this phone call one day from Ken, and him assuming that I knew who he was. I had no idea who he was, but we did form this friendship on the phone. And literally, we spoke on the phone for 6 months before we even met face to face, and which was great because we really got to know each other on a deep level. And we were not, I was one of those people who ran away from relationships if they lasted too long. But because we had this underpinning of deep emotional and intellectual connection, by the time we met, it was kind of love at first sight.
And so, yeah, of course, he claimed that he had met you already, but
He keeps saying that, yeah, and he sent me all his articles and his books, and I was at the time working as an actor, doing commercials and soap operas and things like that. So I sent him my things. I mean, it was pretty goofy if you think about it, but it was fun.
how did he ever?
Pre-social media.
Right, but how did he ever get you to leave the acting world, which is really exciting, and you're in LA, it's the heart of it all. How did he ever convince you? He must be a pretty persuasive guy. But how
Yeah,
did
he
he?
is. He's a very persuasive guy, but it went well beyond that, Michelle, because Ken met me at a time where I was at a pivotal place in my career that if I didn't take off, I was a working actor. So I was making a great living
Yeah.
as an actor, but I wasn't going to where I had envisioned, very frankly. And I was at the point where, like, I wanted to reinvent myself. And I was completely fascinated because I was in my late 20s, early 30s. I was obsessed with the idea of there were things you could do yourself, lifestyle steps you could take to look better, feel better, actually be better. And it although it wasn't the same thing that Ken was involved in because he was really interested in the field of aging, we began to see that there were a lot of connections between what I was interested in and what he was already working in. And we decided, you know what, let's try to combine it in some kind of interesting and exciting way. And we did.
So tell us more about Age Wave and what it actually represents in terms of your mission statement and the future of longevity. Because this is a long time now that you've been doing this, so
Yeah,
I'm sure you've had many iterations.
we
And
have.
yeah, so tell us more about that history.
Okay, so we started Age Wave at our kitchen table, deciding that this was going to be a great idea. We'd go out and do keynote speeches at corporate headquarters all over the countries. And you know what? It caught on. We thought of ourselves as being the Paul Revere's of aging,
Uh,
planting seeds, almost like Johnny Appleseed, also, kind of planting seeds all over the country about a new, better kind of aging. And so from there, we started doing on behalf of various corporations. We frankly then and still now work with a lot of the Fortune 500 companies. In fact, mostly Fortune 50 companies, companies like Bank of America and Edward Jones and Procter and Gamble. I mean, we were working with the creme de la creme of corporate America, and they would come to us and say, "Gee, could you dig deeper into better understanding what older Americans are like? What are they looking for? What do they want? What are their wants and needs? And how can we help them better prepare for that next phase of life?" So through research and consulting, frankly, you could think of us as a kind of think tank or consulting firm focused on research and consulting having to do with aging, longevity, and this new retirement, and really digging deep into the subjects. And by the way, one of the great benefits of that is through our research, we reached out and created a network of other experts, academics, researchers, scientists, physicians who were at the cutting edge of their expertise. And we got to learn from them as they got to learn from us. And that was pretty awesome.
and so, what changes have you seen in the demographics and the psychographics for these years, these long years that you've been doing this, and how have you adapted to those changes at AgeWave?
Today's podcast is brought to you by Gematria Products. Gematria is based in Carlsbad, California, and they manufacture ultra-high quality dietary supplements using QI technology. Qi, as you probably know, is the energy that runs throughout our bodies and is the basis of Chinese medicine. Use the code AGELESS and get 20% off your order. I highly recommend Gemetria's products. I personally use the Complete Aminos, the Heart Gems, and the Methuselah Life, which is an RNA and DNA sublingual spray. The website to go to is www.gematria.com/QI-technology. And there you'll find out more about this fascinating company, their products, and the technology.
Well, one of the key changes is that we used to talk about this as this growing population of older adults, and along the way we became part of the age wave ourselves. So that began to change things, and we began to see also that it's a positive story. No longer do people think of 50 or 60 or even 70 as being over the hill, and that's good news. But we also got to see that as you begin to hit your 50s and 60s, it's a little bit like playing dodgeball. You're dodging different issues that come up. Maybe you lost a loved one, or maybe you're coping with heart disease or another chronic illness. These are things that as you get older, you're going to have to deal with and try to get to the other side of. And we became more aware of that. I mean, my mom developed Alzheimer's disease. So watching her go down that rabbit hole of cognitive decline was, first of all, heartbreaking, but also it made me realize we've got to end this disease. We've got to come up with solutions that are long-term, not just getting rid of symptoms along the way, which don't always work very well to begin with. So Ken and I both became interested and involved in trying to come up with a cure, trying to prevent or at least delay the onset of Alzheimer's and other cognitive declines, because over the years, we used to label everything Alzheimer's disease, and we've come to learn that there are a variety of different kinds of cognitive decline, and all of which are like that black hole. One of the worst things we need to think about or worry about, and we all worry about it as we get older.
So in that context, just in brain health, what have you learned that has changed your direction and your opinion about the ability for us to prevent Alzheimer's or other cognitive decline?
We don't have a cure. We don't. But we used to think it was all about our genetics. If you have a bad genetic package, which, by the way, I do have a bad genetic package when it comes to Alzheimer's, then you're kind of screwed. It's not a pretty picture, and that frightened me to death. But the good news, and there is some good news, is that scientists and researchers only in the last 3 or 4 years have said, you know what, that's not the case. Only 30% of Alzheimer's disease comes directly from genetics.
Right.
So if you got a bad genetics package like I do, you're okay if you take some preventative steps. And there are some preventative steps. And that's unbelievably great news.
Well, epigenetics has been the greatest development I think, in the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
That we know that we're not stuck. We have
That's right.
Somewhere like, I think in I did the one with the DNA company. It was 60 pages. And
wow.
Unfortunately, the APO for the gene for Alzheimer's was negative. So that was great news. However, I told him, how did I ever get the obesity gene? That was one of my, I've been a size 6 since I was.
I was just going to say, if anyone ever saw what you look like.
Thank you. But, and so, there's an example, I think, maybe if I hadn't been so disciplined, and I'm using this as an example, for the same thing that you're dealing with, which is we're not stuck with these genes. We can do something about it. And that's one of the greatest hopeful messages, I think, of our times, that don't take it as the gospel and now give up.
That's
No,
right.
this is really just your starting point for lifestyle. So epigenetics is really lifestyle genetics, and it means that you can influence. You don't have to be stuck. You can influence your genes by your lifestyle. So tell us how you did it with the Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Okay. So we know that epigenetics is about turning on and turning off different genes that you have
Correct.
in your genetic package. And that, as you said, it's like revelatory. It's like awesome and amazing. And I get really excited about it. One shortcut to think about is that what's good for our heart is also good for our brain.
Right.
And that's sort of a shortcut for all of us, was we know, oh yeah, exercise, really good for your brain.
Right.
It has a dramatic impact on your brain health. Now, interestingly, what I learned along the way when I was writing Ageless Aging is that if you exercise in the morning, you're more likely to get good benefits than if you exercise later in the day. And if you do it on an empty stomach, it even improves the effect of your exercise. One more good piece of news, especially for women, is, well, only for women, is that we don't have to exercise as hard or as long as men to get the same benefits. So that's the exercise piece. But what we eat, my grandmother used to say to me, you are what you eat.
Yeah.
And you are.
Right. And we
So
all.
you want to get rid of those ultra processed foods and the seed oils, and you want to focus on eating what I talk about in Ageless Aging is eating the rainbow. And that doesn't mean, colored cereals. It means eating fruits and vegetables and whole grains that are real food. That's the focus, is eating real food. Then sleep. I mean, sleep is definitely not my superpower, but what we know is sleeping is when your brain takes out the trash, and you want that trash, those toxins, to leave your body. So yeah, you want to get 6 to 8 hours of sleep a night. And by the way, from the sleep experts that I spoke to, it's not necessarily just the quantity of your sleep, it's
Right.
the quality of your sleep that
Right.
really matters. So if you're only getting 5 hours a night of sleep, I'm not suggesting that that's a good thing, but if the quality is really strong,
Yeah.
you're certainly in better shape than if it's not. So that's a few things. Up social connections. I just read something this morning about the newest information about loneliness. Now, we know loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of your health. It affects your blood pressure. It affects the size of your brain. I mean, think about that. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So you definitely want that social connections. And keep in mind, social connections and loneliness, they're not just two ends of the spectrum. I know that I love to spend some time by myself. So spending some alone time is not the same thing as loneliness. And I think people need to understand that difference.
Right.
Having a sense of purpose truly affects our brain.
Right.
And, again, you don't have to be like reinventing yourself or coming up with I'm going to start a nonprofit. It can be something small. It can be like babysitting your grandchildren, or maybe it's walking your dog in the morning. Having a sense of purpose is a really strong thing to have. And the last thing I'll mention, there's a couple others, but the one thing that I really want to emphasize is our attitude towards our own aging really affects the gray matter in our brain. We want to keep a more positive attitude about aging, which is part of the reason why I tell people, say your age and say it proudly.
I'm so glad you said ageless aging, because I neglected to tell everyone that this is the life-changing book that you've just written, and you've had many books, and I so admire anyone that can write a book. I think it takes an amazing discipline, and ageless aging, I'm a I'm just about done. I mean, I've read, I think on to the next to the last chapter. So I've been amazed at how much I already knew how much you reinforced what I already knew. So I'm not trying
Good.
to say that I'm some expert, but I do, I practice all the advice that you give in the book, and I encourage anyone who has not read this book, any woman, because it is focused on women's aging, although I think men should read it because then they could understand the women in their lives
Absolutely.
better. So I don't say, don't read it. It is really a life-changing book. So here, I have it right here. I'll put it up for people if you can see that, I hope. Ageless Aging. And you wrote it with Kate Hanley. So is she someone that has influenced your life and you just joined to collaborate together? Or how did that happen?
Okay, so yeah, I knew that I needed someone to work with. I work best the way I really succeed. I mean, I've had a partnership with my husband. We have other people at AgeWave that I feel really connected to. I love to brainstorm ideas and thoughts, and I always find it better to collaborate than not. It's a good way of getting social connection as well. And I saw that Kate had helped Kara Fitzgerald write her book, Younger You, and I reached out to Kara, and she told me, "Oh, Kate pretty much, well, she was very helpful in writing the book." And so I used Kate in the same exact way. She's a terrific person. She is not an expert on aging per se, but she's fantastic and really well immersed in the health and wellness space. She helped Joseph Mercola with his books as well. She's working right now on a menopause book with someone. So this is what she does.
Right.
She's fantastic. And I would recommend her to anyone.
Right. Well, just to stop for 1 second on this, on the being an author, because of what I said. I think it takes amazing discipline, and of course, in a busy schedule like yours, you're running a company that's been enormously successful, and you're continuing to further that success with new developments and technologies and so forth. So you and Ken, I'm sure, spend a good part of your day with AgeWave and making sure that the companies that you serve are getting the best information and are not only getting the information but applying it. So this is, I think, that just as a segue, I think that's probably one of the most difficult challenges. Is not, you're providing them with a baseline of information.
Yeah,
it's up to them with your guidance to then apply that to their corporations and to their, for their employees. So compliance to information or applying it and making it an action plan. That's not only true for corporations, that's true for all of us in life.
absolutely.
It's one thing to read a book. It's another thing to go use the information you got in an action plan to change your life for the better. But the one thing I did want to ask you in terms of being an author, how much do you find you learn from writing your own book about helping to teach others? Your book has incredible amount of research, and people that you've interviewed, and it must have taken you a long time to get one, to make sure that these are authentic, credible sources, and then to go and interview them, and then to put this all in the book, and then you have a big reference section in the back, which that in itself is huge, to show that there is scientific research behind the claims that you're making and the people that you've interviewed. So just as a curiosity question for anyone that is reading the book but also is interested in their own journey of potentially being an author, what does it take? Just give us a list of qualities that you think it takes to be a good author.
Okay, well, let me begin by describing my process because I think that might be helpful. I am a very social person. And that's part of what I love about AgeWave. It really puts me in touch with information and individuals. And when I started to think about writing Ageless Aging, I realized, okay, I'm not a doctor. I'm an expert. I'm a social scientist interested in aging and the research focused on aging and longevity and health and wellness. That's my thing. So along the way, we had created this unbelievable network of other experts, which I mentioned earlier, people at the cutting edge, physicians, scientists, researchers, academics. So what I decided to do is to reach out to them. And I reached out to about almost 100 of those people who I thought were at the cutting edge. So beyond any kind of doubt, the best scientific and research and academic minds I could think of. And I thought maybe 10, 20 would respond. Well, almost every single person responded positively, which was so great. And it was, during part of COVID. So I scheduled Zoom meetings and we recorded the Zoom meetings. And from those Zoom meetings, I went back and I marked up all the things that I thought were the most interesting. And, I had an idea of where I was going for each chapter, but I was very influenced by the information that I got. And I tried to collect the most recent, the most cutting edge information. And that was my process. And frankly, I have an amazing literary agent, and my literary agent coerced me for lack of a better word. She goes, you need to have not just like a proposal of your idea, but you need to have a roadmap that shows exactly what you have in mind and where you're going. And I even included some of my interviews, just little excerpts from them in my proposal. So my proposal itself was 100 pages.
Oh, wow.
And it included a whole marketing section. And I mean, it was very complete. And as a result, we had 17 interested publishers, which it's really almost unheard of in today's publishing marketplace. And so I chose Mayo Clinic Press because, again, I'm not a doctor. I thought, oh, good, let's get the Mayo Clinic Press to put their stamp of approval on this. And frankly, it was a great idea to do. That was one of my smarter moves. I was well advised to move in that direction rather than other publishers. And they were very rigorous. They put me through medical editorial review at the end, as well as a regular editorial review. And everything was so well researched that they hardly had any comments.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to say, kudos to them and to you and to all your contacts, because the information is concise and it nothing in the book. And I'm not saying this to be gratuitous. I'm just telling you because I read a lot of books. And as you can imagine, being a podcast host and hopefully an influencer, I want my audience to know that when I recommend something, that it's worth their while. So I want to give you that compliment, but I also want to say that, it's a book that has so much meat on the bone that you have to, I've had to read it in doses. I couldn't just do it all at the same time. And I took copious notes, and a lot of questions that came out of it that, you and I can talk about offline, but I'm sure people who are reading it will also have questions. But just one question for you about that. Is there any one person that you would single out that really changed your perspective on women's aging by doing this book?
There were a few. I did not recognize the fact prior to working on this book, the strong differences between women and men. Now, I knew that women lived longer than men and that there was a gender gap when it comes to our health span or the number of healthy years that we live, that women may live longer, yay, we won the longevity lottery. However, we don't do as well when it comes to our health span, even when you correct for the fact that we live longer. So I was a little freaked out by that until I really saw the most recent research telling me that up to 90%, and that's from Calico Labs, Calico Life Sciences. They said up to 90% of your health and well-being has to do with your lifestyle and your environment. So that's really what inspired me in many ways to write the book, because I'm like, oh, wow, the control is in our hands.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are responsible. And then I saw that, the healthcare system, as much as it's been created by well-meaning men for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really talk to women. I mean, yeah, there's women's health, but that's all about reproductive health.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to, for instance, drug testing, up until 2016, the FDA didn't even ask pharmaceutical companies to include women in their clinical trials. Now, that's crazy.
Right.
I mean, think about that. And I learned that from several people, Carol Lee from Wham, and Jennifer Garrison told me that as well from the Buck Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, that was something that other experts already knew, and I just learned. And I was shocked. And I was also felt, okay, this is a chance to help women have agency over their health and well-being through information and action steps.
Mm-hmm. And you interviewed the Stanford Longevity Health, the head of that.
Yeah, Laura Carstensen.
And has she provided any innovative and groundbreaking information to you that you thought you didn't know before?
Although it wasn't something I didn't know before, but it confirmed some research that we did at AgeWave. And that is that as people get older, as they hit 50 and 60, their sense of happiness and resilience actually increases. And I thought, wow, that's pretty incredible. And people ought to know that there's three kinds of aging. We have the chronologic, which we've talked about, the number of birthdays you have. Then there's the biologic, which is the age of your different organs and such in your body. And then the third kind is your emotional aging. And when it comes to emotional aging, that's something that's, barring having cognitive decline, can actually increase as you get older. So again, happiness, resilience, lack of stress and anxiety, these are all things that we gain as we get older. And that, to me, is amazing.
I think this is really important for people to understand, because in our society, youthfulness is always what is so applauded, and it's, thanks to the media, makes women who are getting older so stressed out by their, if they see a wrinkle under their eye, they say, oh my God, I'm ready to go to the grave. It's dramatic. And so what you're doing is helping women to love themselves more and love the fact that the aging does bring this wisdom, understanding, and, particularly women who have gone through careers or raised children and had, a really full life. And by the way, had love in their life. Love is, I think, it is everything in terms of everything, even the way you talked about today. If you love yourself, you're going to take the steps to better care for yourself in all facets of your life, and all the things that you discussed as the key ingredients for that. And then if you love another, or another loves you, and the mutual relationship like you've had with Ken and I had with my late husband, this is probably the cornerstone of our self-image, is that we have known how to give and receive love. And honestly, I think that, the psychological and emotional part of the aging quotient that you just talked about is not often discussed. And I think you opened up the, the understanding of those three categories or ingredients for aging. Just curious, what is your biological age?
Okay, so again, there's those three kinds of aging. Biologic aging can be tested now. I'm not 100% sure how accurate these tests are, but I have done a test. And again, I'm 74 and my biologic age was 51.
I love that. I love that. So you and I, we're about the same age, and we both have the similar biological ages. And I agree with you. I'm going to do that test again.
Me too.
Yeah, because there are many, many technological updates. And, if you have had one situation in your life, let's say, in your case, you had the hip replacement. In my case,
That's right. Double hip replacement.
Double hip. I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. In my case, I had, a bike accident. So it caused me a broken ankle and a tibia fibula. So those are, life-changing and could cause some aging issues. Even though they're physiological, they have a mental component. Because
no doubt about it.
I remember reading in your book, and I couldn't tell you how, I want everybody to know just how much compassion I felt for you, because I absolutely felt the same way. When when you first get through a surgery, they want you to use equipment, let's say a cane or crutches or
a walker.
I mean, and so, when you're as healthy as we are and you're told that, oh, you have to have these or use these, it's a real setback psychologically.
Yes.
You just don't see yourself, I mean, I when I get off the airplane and I see wheelchairs coming for people, I have the greatest amount of empathy and determination. That will never be me. Same thing for assisted living. I think it's incredible that there are some really good options, but my determination and my goal is that I'll always live on my own.
Yeah.
Wanted to do something like that would only be for the social part. But honestly, I believe that I'll live in my home till the end of my life. And I imagine that, you feel the same way. But in your book, you mentioned that you just could not accept that your doctor wanted you to use a cane or whatever.
Yeah, I got a lot of, doctors, especially surgeons, they're really good at what they do.
Yeah.
And what they do is surgery. And so they're not necessarily so good at pre-recovery or recovery. And so I had to come up with my own plan. And, their line of reasoning, which makes sense, is, it's going to take you a long time to get over this. You're going to be in the hospital, because I was doing 2 hips at one time.
Right.
I said 2 hips one time, you're going to be in the hospital for 5 days. Then you're going to go home and you're probably going to be walking with assistance for, either a walker or a cane for, let's say, a month. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
And so I created a plan for myself. And one of the key ingredients for that plan was an anti-inflammatory diet, because I wanted to get my inflammation, even though I ate a healthy diet already, I wanted to get rid of all inflammation in my body. And that's when I started meditating also. And I did a number of other things, but instead of spending 4 or 5 days in the hospital, I spent one night. And they don't let you leave the hospital until you can walk upstairs. And one nurse gave me the best piece of advice. She said, if you can walk up one stair, you can walk up as many as you want.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, that's something I can use.
Right.
Then I went home, and my house has a lot of stairs.
Yes.
But within 2 days, I was able to walk without any assistance, no cane, no walker. I walked like a duck. I looked so silly, but I was able to walk on my own, and it was so empowering.
Well, this is inspirational for anybody that has to go through any kind of debilitating experience, but also it's for anybody, because it just shows you the power of the mental, your mental and psychological powers to influence action and results,
and getting rid of inflammation.
Yeah.
In every way possible. I mean, inflammation to me seems to be one of the biggest culprits when it comes to aging.
It's funny because just a week ago, Adam Perlman was on my, Adam from
I do.
From Pendulum. He's the chief scientific officer, and Pendulum has become one of the most important companies, I think, around with the
I agree.
research on the gut microbiome and its connection to the brain and connection to weight loss. But he and I were talking just about this very subject, and I was telling him that I was on the advisory board for Dr. Barry Sears way back in the 90s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that Barry Sears was the very first doctor to talk about inflammation.
Really? Wow.
American Academy of Anti-Aging, he wasn't that well received initially. And then over time, he became the hero because, he had the zone diet and he believed that the anti-inflammatory diet, which the zone was the basis of that was anti-inflammatory. But that term has now become the cornerstone of
Yes.
Wellness. And
yeah, it's one of the hallmarks of aging, inflammation. Not the only one, but it's one that we can really grab onto and do something about.
right.
And they're saying that it impacts, none of these hallmarks are in silos on their own. They all influence each other. So it's a great place to start.
And that's why they call it integrative medicine, because
That's right.
it isn't just one source or one influence or one cause. It's a mixture, but you touched on many of them today. So tell us about the anti-inflammatory diet that you adopted.
Okay, so I did a lot of research. I spoke to some of the experts in my own network, and it's very simple. I haven't eaten red meat, and I'm not saying red meat is bad. I just haven't eaten it in 40 years because at the time I stopped eating it, the belief was it wasn't good for you.
Yeah.
So I eat chicken and I eat fish, mostly fish, and lots of fruits and veggies. But what I did is I cut out all gluten, and I cut out all dairy, and I cut out as much sugar as I could. Sugar is hard because it's in everything. And what I found was, and I was in excruciating pain, mind you. I was still exercising, but I was, taking Advils before I'd exercise. And I was I wouldn't say a mess, but I was in that direction. And what I found was I was able in a few weeks to stop taking any kind of anti-inflammatory before I exercised. And then within 6 weeks, all the pain in my hips went away. All of it. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. So in telling other people who, with all the influences and the temptations in our lives, how do you get people to make those changes so because it's going to help them?
Yeah.
But again, it's the same thing of compliance that we talked about with AgeWave and getting your corporations and your clients there to basically influence the results with their employees. So how do you do that with people that are, the truth, the facts, and yet not everybody can follow your advice?
Okay, well, yeah, you are 100% right, Michelle. I've had a couple of people call me on the phone, and I was happy to talk to them and because they were having hip problems or knee problems or shoulder problems. And I would describe the diet, and they would say, oh, no, that's way too hard. I can't do that. But it's not hard at all. I mean, the gluten-free products that are out there today are amazing.
Right.
Cutting out dairy is not such a big deal. And, cutting out sugar, you're going to feel so much better that you're going to be happy about the choice you made. But, the obstacle is getting started and staying committed and recognizing the fact that you may fall off the wagon, and that's okay. So, in Ageless Aging, I do suggest a process for getting there, but the most important thing is to really have a goal and to be very clear about the goal and to write that goal down and journal every day. Okay, how did I do? And if you're not perfect, that's fine, but moving in the right direction. And as you see progress, maybe you fall off the wagon once in a while and get back on. I mean, that experience of getting back on afterwards will make you even more committed.
I promised you yesterday when we spoke that we met, which was wonderful. Thank you so much. It was a great time to have met you in person. And I always say, I said this with Adam because I met him in person, that it makes it so much more exciting to interview a guest on my podcast when I've actually had a chance to one-on-one get to know them. So, but I did promise you I was going to ask you one question, and that is what I hope you've had some time to think about it. You have been prolific, and I've all over the internet. I've listened to your talks. I've now read, almost finished your book, and I haven't read your other books, but how in all of these talks that you've done and your public speaking and your writing, what questions have never been asked of you that you're passionate about?
Well, I wouldn't say never been asked, but keep in mind that what I suggest to people is that it's not just about one thing. It's about a holistic list of ingredients. And we've talked about a bunch of them, like exercise and social connections and purpose. But one of the and by the way, they all impact each other. We've kind of mentioned that earlier. So it's got this cascading positive effect. But one of the ingredients that you don't hear a lot about in other books on longevity and aging has to do with our financial well-being. Because finances, that's a piece of the puzzle. That's one of the ingredients. And we talk about wealth, and it's kind of like a dirty word in our world. We think of it as entitlement and wealth and privilege. And well, the derivation of the word wealth, it comes from the Welsh, and it means well-being. Yes. And I would say having an understanding of finances and putting a financial plan into action, especially for women who live longer than men and are going to need that extra financial security, is of utmost importance. And keep in mind, when you aren't feeling financially secure, it creates a lot of stress. Cortisol levels go up, and that can manifest as disease. And you don't even want to go there. So, as a step number one, I would say learn the language of finance. And you can do that online. I mean, it's so available. And then find someone, it could be a friend, it could be a mentor, it could be a financial advisor, and get started. Start somewhere. Maybe it's just enrolling in a 401k program, but the earlier you can get started, the better. And on the other side of the coin, it's never too late.
Mm-hmm. Well, the downturn in 2008 and the last few years in our lives have been a real test of people's ability to be resilient.
Yes.
So many people who, well, what did they say? 70% of the people in the world, in the United States, feel like, they've been disadvantaged economically in the last several years. And starting in 2008, I think there was a bit of a rebound for a few people, but it really has been difficult. And then not to mention COVID, which, that caused so much debilitating mental illness.
That's right.
And to a milder degree, the stress levels, that being isolated, because you mentioned earlier, social connection.
Yes.
So I think we have been really tested. And that's why your book is so timely, because it does give hope that we always have resilience to turn to. We always have to believe in ourselves and love ourselves so that we can rebound. It's about, I always use the Humpty Dumpty. Pick up the pieces and start again. Never ever give up. If someone asked, "What is your mantra?" What would you say? That's mine, but what would you say?
I come back to this idea of keeping a positive attitude all the time, even when I'm down in the dumps or something horrible happens. I remind myself, and I look at the research, because I'm kind of a research wonk, and I know that having a positive attitude, even about aging and your own health and wellness, it actually influences your epigenetics and your brain health. And, if I'm going to be alive, I want to be in the best shape possible. So, for right now, for example, I can get anxious watching the news.
Yes.
So I have taken a sabbatical from the news. I just, I have blocked news Instagram posts that I used to thrive on. I won't put on the TV and listen to any of the morning shows or anything like that. And I have really blocked some of the newsletters and periodicals that I get, at least temporarily, because it just makes me a little crazy, and I recognize that. So am I putting my head in the sand? Yes.
Yeah. Well, maybe a little bit, but that isn't really a permanent thing. I think you're absolutely correct in that you're basically saying, I'm not in denial. I'm only doing what I know is healthy for me and as a human being, and I want to be sure that I don't digress from my journey, my purpose. And if that purpose is being minimized or compromised by the divisiveness in the world today,
yes,
that you're doing what's healthy for you. And I think this is a good message for people, not to say, just to derail your involvement in your community and in the world, but yet just do what you have to do to stay on your journey, on your track. And then it'll all, everything always has a way of coming around, right?
I hope you're right. Yeah.
What today is not going to be what is here, 4 years from today. Hopefully we're getting a more positive direction in the world, and we'll be going through the so-called golden age of living. I do think, however, that health is one of the biggest challenges facing our world. Why is it that the United States used to be number one in the Western world as far as healthcare, and now we're number 37? I mean, we're last or close to last
in the Western world. Yes.
World. Yeah, that's what I'm only limiting it to that. But we are the leader of the Western world, so why are we not leading in terms of healthcare? And you said it in your book, and you said it today, that women can live longer, but if we're not living better, and when you ask your audience to raise their hand and say, yeah, how many want to live to 100? Yeah. And how many want to live to 100 if the last years are not healthy years, and everybody's going to lower their hand?
Yeah.
It's that health span and lifespan paradigm that you focus on. And I just wonder, is there anything that you see that can change that paradigm, so that the United States and us as women within that cohort can become healthier with the not only the certain things that you say in the book, but just one lesson that you would say, lesson learned, to live longer but healthier life.
Yeah. Okay, so as you pointed out, we spend more on healthcare in the United States than any other country, and yet the results are horrible. I mean, we are not doing well in terms of health span, brain span, or lifespan.
Right.
So it's a sad reality. I think that our healthcare system is sick care. It's reactive.
Yeah.
It reacts when you already have something and tries to either fix it or halt it,
right.
Which I think is too late. I think the idea of preventative health care and health and wellness early on, creating prevention early in our 30s, 40s, 50s, that's when we should start thinking about these things, but also recognizing that there are small things that we can do. I mean, if you start doing muscle strengthening to fight sarcopenia, which is muscle weakness and muscle loss, which starts to happen, by the way, in your 30s, you can actually reverse the situation. That's remarkable, that you can start building muscle mass, muscle strength, and become more powerful. And that's just such a great metaphor for what we can do if we recognize the fact that we have agency over our own health and wellness, and that we're in charge. It's not the healthcare system, it's the individuals. We are in charge.
I love that. However, information is power.
Yes.
one of the things that Peter Diamandis said, and I've mentioned this several times on my podcast and other with other guests, that really excited me. One of the things he said at the A4M, at American Academy of Anti-Aging, two years ago, right during COVID. Well, actually, no, it was, let's see, 2 years. Yeah, 22. He was the keynote when they had their first, I think it was the first meeting after COVID.
Yeah, I remember. I was there.
You were there. Do you remember what he said about in the last 10 years, we've had more technological gains in healthcare than in the last 100 years?
Yeah.
And I think the audience really stood up and like took notice to that bold statement. But when you think about it and break it down into its components, it does make a lot of sense. Look at what we've got. We have the testing you and I talked about with our true age, our biological age. Mm-hmm. We have the stem cell research. Now you can even take stem cells orally. And according to one of my guests at STEM Regen, Dr. Christian Drapeau, you don't have to go to do, offshore or wherever to get injections. For some people, it's out of range cost-wise. And then we have telomere testing. We have DNA methylation testing. We have peptides. These peptides are now the new darlings of.
Yeah, everybody loves them.
Yeah. So, do you think that statement was too aggressive, or
no? I think he's right, and at the same time, I think that those technologies are not available to everyone, and that we need to recognize that. And I personally think that there's some things that are low cost or no cost that I talk about in Ageless Aging that I think that we need to take advantage of. And for those of us who are lucky enough to know about, and I talk about a lot of these things in Ageless Aging, but to take advantage of, yeah, sure, take it. But many of these things are still experimental, although AI is going to completely change the game. And I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's like one of the biggest ones. And he was actually the keynote, the essence of his speech was about AI. So
yeah,
I'm sorry, I forgot that one. That's huge. So because I know we're going to have to end soon, Maddy, I just want to ask you a kind of an introspective question. Where do you want to go from here? Where do you see your life journey heading now as we move into the next phase?
Well, I'm working on a new chapter. We're coming out in October with Mayo Clinic Press asked me if I would add a new chapter with all the newest technologies and such, as you're alluding to these things, in Ageless Aging. So that'll be coming out next October.
Oh, that is so exciting. So, that question I just asked you is really quite appropriate because
yeah, it is. It definitely is. That's why I spoke with Adam Perlman. He's gave me a lot of information because I'm really interested. I'm really interested in a couple of things. I'm really interested in the gut-brain connection.
Yes.
And with that in mind, because I think that has a lot to do with our future health, especially women who have so many gut health issues.
Right.
And also the vagus nerve, which travels from our gut up to our brain. I think that is so underappreciated as something that affects our health. So those are two things that I'm kind of obsessed with right now.
Right.
I'm doing a lot of keynotes. I love doing that. I love getting, in as many ways as I can, getting the message out that's really simple, that, we are in charge of our health and well-being.
Right.
It's not the doctors. It's not the healthcare system.
Right.
It's us. It's what we choose to do. And there's some very low cost or no cost steps we can take. And then there's some super cool things that are a little more experimental that are coming onto the playing field. And that's awesome.
Yeah, you say in the book, be the CEO of your own health, of your healthcare, and that is, I think, it says it in a nutshell. If you don't take the responsibility, no one else is going to do it for you. So
doctors don't have the time. And
exactly. And our healthcare system isn't set up, at least the allopathic system isn't set
that's right.
doctors to be able to accept insurance and give you a lot of personal time. It's just not the way it works. And so we accept that and then do something about it that takes individual responsibility.
That's right. So, just do something.
Something. Right. And learn from people like you, hopefully, and people like me, because
yes, thank you.
have studied this field and we really want to make a difference. I mean, when I started the podcast, the whole point was to spread information, to affect people's lives, to influence people positively, to make changes. But information is power. And so I was, always passionate about wellness, even back in my 20s, just like you. So the fact I had a lot of years to do the research, and hey, by the way, there were a lot of dead ends. I want people to know that it isn't always an equal playing field. You do make a lot of false starts and journeys that don't end up where you want them to.
That's right.
You spend money on things that don't pay you back, and so don't think it's going to be easy sailing, because it is definitely a learning experience, and that is always full of challenges. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time with us today, Maddy. And before we close, I did want to mention to everyone that you've offered something very generous, which is your book, Ageless Aging, can be autographed. And I know you personally do it, right? It's not.
I do. Yeah, it's fun. I love doing it, actually.
And contact you and ask for that. So can you tell us the information that would be what people would do if they want to get that copy of your book?
They can go to my website, maddydychtwald.com, and send me an email, and I'll be happy to do it with your mailing address.
And if they use the ageless code, that will give you the idea.
Yeah, ageless. Yeah.
They say we're calling because we saw ageless and timeless, or we have the ageless codes, and that will trigger you. But they do have to pay for the book, right? First, and then do they send the book to you, or do you send them the book autographed after they have done the financial part of it?
I can send them the book autographed after they do the financial part of it.
Perfect.
To make it as easy as possible.
Right. And that would be through your website, not on Amazon?
Yeah, do it through my website. I'll be happy to make that happen for you.
So much. And make sure to spell your last name for everybody.
Okay. So my first name is Maddy, Maddy. I know a lot of Maddies spell it IE, not me. Right. And the last name is Dychtwald. Very hard last name. D like David, Y, C-H, T like Tom, W-A-L-D like David. Or they could also go to Age Wave, which is a little easier. Age like getting older, wave like a wave in the ocean.
Right, which is a great name, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
All right, and I did tell you that your husband influenced me dramatically in my journey when I heard him speak, and ran out and got his book. And this was back in, it was either the late 80s or the 90s. It must have been the 90s, because that was about 40 years ago, right? But he was amazing. And honestly,
thank you.
Please tell him that he had really it was a day of reckoning, really listening.
Wow. And
I was in the corporate world at that point. So, I wanted to take his information and give it to everybody.
Oh, great. I love that. So I'll definitely share that with him. He'll love hearing that.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you again. And I want you to have a wonderful weekend. I know you have a beautiful family, and you're going to be going to a vacation with them at Christmas. So this is a time to, again, make yourself younger, because you're with the loved ones. And that always brings joy and peace and happiness. So all the best to you, Maddy.
Oh, same to you. And thank you for having me as a guest. I loved it.
Okay. You take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.